Have you ever walked into a room and without saying a word, someone instantly commanded your attention? They didn't shout, they didn't posture, they didn't even speak. And yet, they dominated the space. That's the kind of presence we're talking about today. The kind that doesn't need volume, the kind that doesn't chase respect. It attracts it. Niccolò Machiavelli, the infamous strategist behind The Prince, understood something most people still don't. The moment you argue, you lose leverage. You step into an emotional battlefield. You reveal your hand. You expose that you need to be right, and that in itself weakens your power. Because here's the truth. Arguing is not strength. Arguing is reaction. And in the world of Stoic philosophy and Machiavellian discipline, reaction is a liability. The most powerful people don't need to explain themselves. They don't chase approval. They don't enter every debate, because their presence, calm, composed, and unreadable, is their power. Let's take a moment and think about this in your own life. Have you ever said too much in an argument and immediately regretted it? Have you ever felt that pit in your stomach after realizing you gave someone too much emotional access? We've all been there. But the Stoics taught us that the person who stays silent when provoked is the one who actually wins. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, once wrote, "If you are disturbed by something, it is not the thing itself, but your judgment of it." And what is an argument really? It's a signal that you've been disturbed. It's a message that you're reacting, not reasoning. It tells the other person, "You've got me." But when you stay silent, when you respond not with emotion, but with presence, you keep your frame. You keep your advantage. Now, this isn't about being passive or weak. Stoicism isn't silence out of fear, and Machiavelli didn't suggest silence to avoid conflict. They both believed in strategic restraint. You don't speak just to be heard. You speak when it serves your purpose. You stay silent when it protects your position, because every time you argue, you give away two things: your energy, your mystery, and mystery is power. So here's what I want you to take from this video. In a world full of noise, the quiet one stands out. In a room full of opinions, the composed one gets listened to. And in a society obsessed with winning arguments, the person who doesn't argue at all often wins the war. Today we begin a journey, not to become louder, not to become more persuasive, but to become more disciplined, more intentional, and more powerful, by not reacting when the world demands it most, because the silent man is not empty. He's focused, he's dangerous, and he's never playing the game everyone else is trapped in. So stay with me. In the next chapters, we'll dive into why arguing backfires, how silence becomes your armor, and the daily Stoic techniques that make you unshakable, even when you're provoked. But for now, remember this: sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Part 1. Arguing exposes weakness. Let's start with a tough truth, one most people never want to hear. Arguing doesn't prove you're strong, it proves you've been triggered. Think about that. The moment you jump into a heated debate, raise your voice, or scramble to explain yourself, you're not winning respect. You're broadcasting vulnerability. You're saying, "I need you to understand me. I need to win this. I need to be right." And that, according to both Stoic thinkers and Machiavellian strategists, is a position of weakness. We live in a world obsessed with being right. But here's the uncomfortable reality. Influence doesn't come from logic. It comes from perception. You can have the most rational, well-structured argument in the world, but if the other person's ego feels threatened, logic dies. Because people don't change their minds when they feel attacked. They double down. They dig their heels in. Not because you're wrong, but because their pride won't let them back down. Ever been in an argument that made you feel like you were just going in circles? That no matter how calm or smart you were, the other person just wouldn't listen? That's not a communication problem. That's a human nature problem. Ego resists change. especially when it feels cornered. And the irony, the more passionately you argue, the more resistance you create, the more pressure you apply, the more they harden their position. Let's break this down another way. Imagine two people on opposite sides of a rope, locked in a tug of war. Every time you pull harder, what does the other person do? They pull back, instinctively. That's how arguing works. You think you're convincing someone, but what you're really doing is giving them something to push against. And every time you pull, you're giving them more reason to stay right where they are. Now let's flip the perspective. Imagine walking away from that rope, letting go, refusing to engage in the tug. What happens? They're left pulling against nothing. No resistance, no fuel, just space and silence. And in that space, something powerful happens. They start reflecting, not because you pushed them, but because you didn't. The Stoics believed in this deeply. Epictetus taught that true power lies in self-control, not control over others. He said, "It is not events that disturb people, but their judgments about them." So when someone comes at you, aggressive, defensive, emotionally charged, and you don't react, you become untouchable. They expected a fight. You gave them calm. They wanted a reaction. You gave them silence. And that, right there, is where influence begins. So what's the takeaway here? If you want to change someone's mind, don't argue. Stay grounded, stay clear, stay above. Because the moment you argue, you're no longer leading. You're reacting, and no great leader, no powerful figure in history ever changed the world by chasing validation in a shouting match. They influenced not through volume, but through presence, not through emotional chaos, but through emotional discipline. Here's a final question to sit with. In your last argument, were you trying to win, or were you trying to feel seen? Because often, what we call debating is just the ego saying, "Please validate me." But the Stoic response is this: I don't need to be right. I need to stay in control of myself. And that's the difference between someone who reacts and someone who leads. In the next chapter, we'll dive into how silence itself becomes a strategic weapon and how Machiavelli used it to gain control without ever raising his voice. But for now, remember this: don't argue to look strong. Stay calm to be strong. Part 2. Silence is strategic power. Let me tell you a secret about powerful people. They don't argue. They don't chase validation. They don't explain themselves to everyone. Instead, they use a weapon far more effective than shouting: silence. Because while words can impress, silence unsettles. Silence confuses. Silence gives you presence without effort. Let's flip the script. We're taught from a young age that speaking up is strength, that being loud gets you noticed, that having a quick comeback makes you respected. But what if the opposite is true? What if your silence makes people wonder about you? What if your silence gives you power they can't touch? Here's why it matters. The moment you argue, you show your emotional triggers, but the moment you go silent, you become unreadable. And unreadable people are unpredictable. Unpredictable people are powerful. It's like being a fortress with no doors. You can be seen, but you can't be accessed. They don't know where to attack, so they don't. You've probably felt this before. Think of a time someone stayed calm while everyone else argued. They didn't flinch, didn't defend, didn't take the bait. And somehow, they ended up controlling the room. That's no accident. That's strategic restraint. It's what both Stoic philosophers and Machiavellian thinkers understood at the highest level. The one who reacts least controls the most. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic master, faced betrayal, war, and political chaos, but he rarely raised his voice. He observed, he reflected. He chose his words like a surgeon chooses a scalpel. And more often than not, he said nothing at all. Because silence doesn't mean absence. It means deliberate presence. Silence creates a mirror. When you say nothing, you force the other person to confront their own emotions. their own assumptions, their own insecurity. It's no longer about your reaction, it's about their reflection, and that's where the shift happens. Instead of giving them your energy, you leave them with themselves, and that's the most uncomfortable place to. You think about it like this. When someone insults you and you fire back, they know they've struck a nerve. But when you don't react, when you simply stare, when you nod and walk away, they're left spinning in their own storm, wondering if they were even worth your time. That's not passive. That's dominance without aggression. That's how real leaders operate. Now let's be clear. This isn't about avoiding hard conversations. It's not about staying silent when injustice needs to be challenged. This is about choosing your silence strategically. Because not every opinion deserves your energy. Not every insult deserves a reply. Not every argument deserves your peace. Machiavelli once wrote that a ruler should appear approachable, but remain elusive. Why? Because once people can predict you, they can manipulate you. But when you hold your ground in silence, you become impossible to control. Your stillness becomes your armor. Your restraint becomes your shield. And your silence, it speaks volumes. So here's the question. When was the last time you let silence do the talking for you? When was the last time you didn't defend, didn't explain, didn't flinch, but simply let your presence, your posture, your calm speak for itself? Because silence isn't empty. Silence is full of intention. It's what keeps powerful people in control when the world around them spirals out of it. In the next part, we'll explore how arguing not only costs you energy, but also costs you authority, and how staying silent can prevent unnecessary enemies, stress, and humiliation. But for now, remember, arguing reveals your emotions, silence reveals your strength, and sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. Part 3. The hidden costs of arguing on. The surface arguing might feel like strength. You're defending your beliefs, you're standing your ground, you're proving your point. But beneath the surface, you're giving something away. And it's not just your time, it's not just your energy, you're giving away your emotional power. Let's unpack that. Every argument has a frame, an emotional stage set by the person who provokes you, and the moment you engage in their frame, you've already lost the advantage. You've stepped into their world. You've validated their tone, their rhythm, their need for conflict. And most of all, you've shown your emotional limits. Here's what most people don't realize. When you argue, you reveal exactly where your ego begins and where it ends. You show what offends you. You show what you're afraid of. You show what you need to protect. And in doing so, you hand people the exact blueprint of how to control you. It's like giving them your emotional remote control and saying, "Here, push this button if you want me to explode." That's not power, that's exposure. Now compare that to a Stoic response. You're calm, measured, silent. You hear the insult, but you don't absorb it. You see the provocation, but you don't flinch. That's what we call emotional discipline. And emotional discipline is power. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. He wrote, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you." In other words, just because someone throws a spark doesn't mean you have to start a fire. But every time you argue, you fan the flame. You light the match. You let their fire become yours. Let's talk strategy, because this isn't just about philosophy, it's about leadership. Look at the most respected leaders, past and present. They don't argue. They don't defend every decision. They don't step into emotional battles. What do? They make a statement. They set a boundary, and then they move on. Not with arrogance, but with clarity. Because once you start debating every opinion, every rumor, every attack, you've stopped leading and started reacting. There's another cost most people don't see: perception. When you argue, you invite judgment, not just from the person you're debating, but from everyone watching. You risk saying something you regret. You risk looking defensive, petty, or insecure. You risk losing the very respect you're trying to protect. But silence? Silence protects perception. It allows you to maintain your presence, your authority, your mystery. Let me ask you, have you ever regretted staying silent? Probably not often, but I bet you've regretted saying too much. Letting your emotions spill, trying to win a debate and losing your peace. That's the hidden tax of arguing. You feel like you're gaining ground, but inside you're bleeding confidence. So what's the Stoic solution? Simple. Don't enter every battlefield you're invited to. You don't need to respond to every jab. You don't need to defend every decision. You don't need to prove your worth with your voice. Let your results speak. Let your boundaries speak. Let your silence speak. Because when you stay calm in the face of chaos, people notice. When you don't argue, people lean in. And when you lead without noise, you become the loudest voice in the room without ever raising your tone. In the next section, we'll look at how this discipline plays out in leadership, relationships, and even social media, and how silence can protect your reputation, your peace, and your influence. But for now, remember, arguing might feel like taking control, but it's often giving it away. Don't just protect your opinion, protect your energy, protect your image, protect your peace, because not every fight is worth your fire. Part 4. Strategic communication in leadership and relationships. Let's be real. Most of our biggest conflicts don't happen with enemies. They happen with the people closest to us. Our teams, our partners, our families, and how we communicate in those moments defines the kind of leader and the kind of human we become. Because whether it's in the boardroom or the living room, there's a truth most people overlook. Arguing doesn't build respect. Composure does. Let's start with leadership. We've all worked with or worked for that kind of leader. The one who has to explain everything, who gets defensive when challenged, who argues every point because they can't stand being misunderstood. And at first it might seem like passion, but over time, it just feels like insecurity. Now think of the opposite. The leader who listens more than they speak, who makes a decision and doesn't feel the need to justify it endlessly, who never raises their voice because they don't have to. That kind of leader earns something no argument ever will: loyalty. Why? Because silence, when paired with action, feels like confidence. The Stoics taught that true authority doesn't come from control, it comes from character. And when you lead with calm consistency, when you don't react to every opinion, when you stay rooted even in chaos, people trust you, not because you told them to, but because you showed them how. That's strategic communication, not noise, not ego, just clarity. Now let's take this to an even more personal place: relationships. Because here's a truth we've all felt. Sometimes the people we love can push our buttons the most. And when tension builds, when the conversation gets heated, when emotions spike, what's the first instinct to prove your point? To argue your way to resolution, to raise your voice, because you feel unheard. But here's the cost. Arguments don't heal wounds. They turn affection into rivalry. They take us and split it into me versus you. But what if you chose a different response? What if you stayed calm, even when it's hard? What if, instead of matching chaos with chaos, you grounded the room with stillness? What if your silence said more than your words ever could? Because here's what happens when you don't react. You de-escalate. You give the other person a chance to self-reflect. You create space for the relationship to breathe. That doesn't mean being a doormat. Stoicism is not about suppressing truth. It's about delivering it wisely. You can speak honestly without shouting. You can express disappointment without blame. You can lead your household, your team, or your relationship without ever needing to win. Because the real victory is peace. Here's a powerful example. In any relationship, the calm partner almost always holds the emotional steering wheel. They don't rush to defend themselves. They don't try to dominate the room. They listen, they breathe, they respond with intention, and slowly, the storm quiets, not because the conflict disappeared, but because someone chose discipline over drama. So ask yourself, where in my life am I using noise? Where I should be using presence? Is it a conversation with your partner? A disagreement with your coworker? A moment where leadership requires calm, not control? Because once you see the difference, you'll start showing up differently. The next chapter will explore how this applies in the digital world, especially in the age of social media, where silence might just be the most underrated superpower of all. But for now, remember, strong leaders don't argue. They act. Strong relationships aren't fueled by volume. They're sustained by respect. And when you learn to speak less but mean more, you don't just communicate, you influence. Part 5. In the age of social media, we live in a world where everyone has a platform. Every opinion gets a spotlight. Every disagreement gets a comment thread. And every reaction gets a reaction. But here's the thing most people haven't realized yet. Arguing online doesn't make you look strong. It makes you look unsettled. It's easy to get pulled into digital debates. Someone says something ignorant. Someone posts something offensive. Someone misrepresents your words, your work, your character, and you feel that urge to defend, correct, clap back. But before you do, ask yourself this: is this about clarity or control? Am I trying to inform or just trying to win? Because the truth is, arguing on the internet is rarely about truth. It's about ego. And in the process of proving your point, you lose your peace. Let's break it down. When you argue online, you step into a space where tone is invisible, context is lost, and attention spans are 5 seconds long. You're not having a conversation. You're performing for spectators, and every word you type is being judged not for accuracy, but for emotion. Did you sound angry? Did you sound desperate? Did you just give away your emotional frame? Because once you do, you've lost authority. Here's a principle from both Stoicism and Machiavelli. The more power you have, the less you need to explain yourself. Online arguments flip that on its head. Suddenly, powerful people are defending themselves to strangers. Leaders are debating bots. Grown adults are trading insults with usernames they'll never meet. And who really wins? No one. Because every second spent fighting in comment sections is a second not spent building something real. Here's what Stoic silence teaches us in the digital age. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Sometimes silence is not just a personal choice, it's a strategy. Silence becomes a filter. It separates what's worth your time from what's just noise. It separates real questions from attention-seeking bait. And it protects your image, your energy, your inner stillness. Let me give you an example. A public figure posts something thoughtful. The comment section erupts. One person says they're a genius. Another calls them a fraud. A third demands an explanation. Now, imagine that person responding to every insult, every misquote, every angry emoji. Would you respect them more? Or would they suddenly seem less composed? That's the trap of social media. It tricks you into thinking that visibility equals value. But real power, real presence, isn't measured by how loudly you react. It's measured by how rarely you need to. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That's the rule. Don't argue. Embody. So how do we navigate social media with Stoic strength? Pause before posting. Ask, does this elevate the conversation or just feed my ego? Resist the bait. Not every ignorant comment deserves correction. Let your work speak. Silence isn't retreat. It's restraint. Protect your peace. Not everyone deserves your energy or your explanation. Because the more you engage in digital chaos, the less time you have for real-life clarity. So the next time you feel pulled into a public debate, a comment war, a back and forth that leads nowhere, remember, silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And the strongest voice online is often the one that doesn't need to speak. In the next section, we'll break down practical ways to apply Stoic restraint every single day, in conversations, in conflict, in leadership, and how that shapes not only how others see you, but how you see yourself. But for now, take this with you. You don't win influence by being louder, you win it by being wiser. Part 6. Applying the Stoic, Machiavellian discipline. So far, we've talked about presence, we've talked about silence, we've talked about restraint, but now it's time to get practical. Because Stoicism isn't just ancient wisdom you read in a dusty book, and Machiavellian strategy isn't about cold manipulation. When fused together, they form a discipline, one that can be practiced daily, one that reshapes how you lead, how you love, and how you live. Let's start with the heat of the moment. Conflict. Someone challenges you, criticizes you. Maybe they even try to provoke you. What's your instinct? To jump in, to correct, to argue. But here's your new reflex: pause. Breathe. Hold the frame. Take 2 seconds. Inhale slowly. Drop your shoulders. Let the storm pass through you, not into you, because in those 2 seconds you reclaim your power. Instead of reacting, choose your words carefully. You don't need to clap back. You don't need to win the moment. Try this instead. You're entitled to your view. Or even better, say nothing. That single sentence, spoken calmly, is stronger than a dozen counterattacks. It signals maturity. It signals control. And most importantly, it signals that your peace is not up for negotiation. Now let's bring this into relationships. Whether romantic, familial, or professional, emotions can run high. We often feel the urge to match energy. They yell, we yell. They cry, we react. They press our buttons and we press back. But that's not discipline, that's imitation. So here's the move. Refuse to match emotional chaos. Respond from calm, grounded composure. You don't have to be cold. You just have to be clear. I hear you. Let's come back to this when we're calm. I care more about solving this than proving something. That's not weakness. That's emotional leadership. In business, the rules are no different. People will question your decisions. They'll doubt your vision. Some may even attack your character. And your first instinct might be to defend, to explain, to prove your worth. But remember, in Stoic and Machiavellian thought, power doesn't explain itself. Power performs. You don't need to defend your success. You let your results do the talking. You don't need to respond to every critic. You let your consistency silence the noise. Make the deal. Deliver the work. Then walk out of the room. Because the loudest people in business aren't the most powerful. The quietly effective ones are. So what does a day in Stoic discipline look like? Let's paint the picture. You start the morning with clarity, not chaos. A few deep breaths. A moment of stillness. Maybe a single question. What can I control today? And what can I let go of? Throughout the day, you pause before speaking. You listen more than you react. You don't argue, you don't explain, you simply act with intention. And when conflict comes, as it always does, you remain the eye of the storm. Still, focused, unmoved. This is the path, not of coldness, not of avoidance, but of unshakable composure. Because in a world addicted to reaction, discipline is your advantage. You stand out not by shouting, but by staying silent. Not by dominating, but by demonstrating. Not by proving, but by embodying. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." That's it, the final word. You're in control of your emotions, of your reactions, of your presence. In the final section, we'll bring it all together, how silence, discipline, and restraint form the invisible force behind lasting power and respect. But for now, carry this with you. You don't need to prove your power. You just need to practice it every day in every word and every pause. And that is enough. Let me leave you with a truth that many people never discover. The most powerful person in the room is not the loudest. It's the one who cannot be provoked. We live in a culture where everyone's racing to be heard, to be seen, to be right. But real power, the kind that doesn't fade when the applause ends, comes from something much deeper. Calm, indifference, mastery. You don't need to yell to make a statement. You don't need to prove anything when you've already proven it to yourself. That's the lesson of Stoicism. That's the edge of Machiavellian strategy. They both understood something most people still don't. He who reacts the least controls the most. When someone insults you and you argue back, you've already lost, because now they know your trigger. They've mapped your emotions. They've learned how to pull your strings. And if they can pull your strings, they can control your frame. But when you stay still, when you smile in silence, when you walk away unfazed, you become unreadable, unpredictable, untouchable. The unreadable man is the most dangerous, not because he hides weakness, but because he operates from strength so deep it doesn't need to surface. People don't know what you're thinking. They don't know how you'll move. They don't know if you even care. That mystery, it builds authority. It commands respect without effort. Here's the truth most people miss. Arguments don't make you look intelligent. They make you look available. Available for petty drama. Available for emotional manipulation. Available for wasting time on people who don't deserve your energy. But when you move in silence, when you speak only when necessary, when your actions carry more weight than your words, you become undeniable. So what's the final takeaway? Let action speak. Let your success be your response. Let your presence, your boundaries, your results. Do the talking, because when you stop chasing validation, you stop being controlled by it. When you stop arguing to be understood, you finally begin to understand yourself. And when you stop reacting, you start leading. Make this your new mantra. Stay silent. Not because you're passive, but because you're focused. Not because you're afraid, but because you're above it. Not because you don't know what to say, but because you don't need to say it. That's real power. Not noise, not dominance, but quiet, unshakable discipline. The kind of strength that walks away. Not because it can't fight, but because it chooses not to. The kind of strength that doesn't need to be seen, because it's felt. So the next time someone tries to bait you, when someone tries to push you into conflict, into defensiveness, into reaction, just breathe, pause, and remember, you don't owe the world your reaction. You owe yourself your peace. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, live it, embody it, and drop a comment below. I lead with calm. Let the world know you're done reacting and ready to command. Until next time, stay focused, stay grounded, and above all, stay silent.